Chainsaw Man is basically just one big meme. By that, I mean that its consistent absurdity makes the story and its characters instantly recognizable. In fact, you could probably make a meme out of every single chapter. And it's this absurdity that makes the story so popular. But it's no accident that Chainsaw Man became this popular. When you consider why the mangaka, Tatsuki Fujimoto, writes the story this way, it's clear that Chainsaw Man is surprisingly similar to JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. That's why, in this video, I'm going to compare how Fujimoto and Araki go about making their manga, and explain why the absurd nature of Chainsaw Man will lead it to become an insanely popular story. Be warned that while I will mention most of them out of context, this video does contain minor spoilers. Before I get started, make sure to comment with your favorite Chainsaw Man moments. I'll pick my favorite and share it as comment of the week in the next video. This week's comment comes from Kojigo for mentioning Blackbeard in the end of One Piece. If you'd like more manga discussions like this one, then make sure to subscribe and follow along with each week's video. With that out of the way, let's talk about just how absurd the story really is. Just the premise itself is pretty crazy. I mean, the story is literally about a dude with a chainsaw for a head. If you're like me, you heard about that and were like, okay, so why does he have a chainsaw for a head? Is he like a superhero or something? And the only real answer is, well, he just sorta has a chainsaw for a head. Like, yeah, it's because he's a devil, that's how he got it, but it's such a silly premise. Granted, not a lot of Shonen Jump stories are normal, but Chainsaw Man is literally just about this dude, who's a chainsaw, who cuts people. That's really all there is to it. So just with the premise alone, you get the idea that this is a pretty absurd story. And for the most part, everything else about the story keeps in line with this absurdity. For example, like many darker stories, Chainsaw Man takes place in a version of our world where devils are commonplace. But the interesting spin on this is that the devils are a product of humans, specifically products of our many different fears. This ranges from the fear of weapons to something as ridiculous and mundane as sea cucumbers. I'm not making that up, by the way, there is a literal sea cucumber devil. But the cool part about this is that it allows the story to present a wide range of abstract concepts through these unique manifestations. Each devil starts with a fear, and then Fujimoto just needs to decide what the fear would look like if it could walk and talk. So with a premise that's already pretty ridiculous, the story takes place in this dreamlike setting where absurd characters and creatures are constantly being introduced. But it's not just the premise and the devils that make Chainsaw Man so absurd. A lot of what makes the story so silly is the behavior from the characters. For example, in the second chapter, the main character, Denji, is told by a public agent that he can only act like a pet. Of course, you've probably already heard of this agent as she is the notorious Makima. Depending on who you ask, she's either the greatest or most overrated waifu ever. Anyway, later on, when Denji is too tired to feed himself, Makima takes his lunch and feeds it to him like a dog. Pretty cute, but very, very weird. Admittedly, this is one of the more tame examples. As the story progresses, Denji realizes he doesn't really have any goals in life. After some very thoughtful reflection, he realizes his goal in life is, well, as he puts it, melons. No, not Pirate King or Magic King. Denji just wants melons. Again, while this is a pretty basic motivation, it's also just kinda ridiculous how in the midst of all this devil business, Denji just wants those melons. But of course, this wouldn't be a proper Chainsaw Man video if I didn't mention the most absurd character, and my personal favorite, Power. I mean, even her name tells you she's a pretty wacky character. She uses words like "tis" but behaves like a 5-year-old, thinks she is a master manipulator but tells painfully obvious lies, and is just about as stubborn as a cat. As you might imagine, Power is a meme machine, and everything she does is pretty legendary. So no matter how you look at it, Chainsaw Man is clearly a very absurd story. But you may be wondering, why does Fujimoto go for this particular style? When each chapter is consistently this strange, one can only assume there must be a reason for it. Well, to answer that question, it only makes sense to look at another bizarre story, specifically JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Even people who've never seen a single episode know that JoJo's is full of absurdity. There's a self-absorbed vampire who shouts "Ree" for no reason, a sexy gangster who apparently thinks licking people is an interrogation tactic, and this one guy who really likes cherries. And while this stuff may seem pretty random, it's all very deliberate. In his book, Manga in Theory and Practice, series creator Hirohiko Araki explains how he goes about creating his story. In regard to the drawings, Araki admits that, "Whenever I draw, I'm always trying to create an image that will leave a deep and lasting impression on the viewer, so that they may see it again years later and think, 'Ah, I remember this picture.'" Clearly, with each scene, Araki aims to impact the reader in such a way that they never quite forget it, whether it be through comedy or tragedy. And a great example of this is the torture dance from Part 5. Everybody loves it when they see it, even if they have no clue why it's in there. In that sense, its main purpose is to impact the viewer such that, even if they have no clue what the hell they're looking at, they're left with an unforgettable experience. Funny enough, Fujimoto has actually admitted to the same mindset with his manga. In a Shonen Jump Q&A, Fujimoto explains that he wants to draw scenes that readers will remember until the day they die. Just like Araki, Fujimoto aims to draw scenes that leave us with an unforgettable experience. And while Fujimoto might have gotten this from Araki's book like the cultured boy he is, I suspect that this is really just a coincidence. Either way, Chainsaw Man is a lot like JoJo's in this sense. Just like Part 5 has the torture dance, Chainsaw Man has the Kobeni dance. And boy does it leave you with an unforgettable experience. This panel is so funny, yet so ridiculous, it might just be my favorite panel in all of manga. And apparently I'm not alone in this. The Kobeni dance is so popular that it actually inspired its own game. So when we look at this kind of absurdity from JoJo's and Chainsaw Man, it's clearly a deliberate effort from the creators to make an everlasting impact on the readers. But now I'd like to go back to our original question and explain exactly how this absurdity makes Chainsaw Man so iconic. To do that, I'd like to take another lesson out of Araki's book. In the same chapter on drawing, he writes about how, when he was starting out as an artist, he didn't understand why certain manga were so popular, even though the art really wasn't that good. And this is something we've all seen before. One Piece is still criticized for its unrealistic proportions, yet is one of the most popular manga in the world. Even Demon Slayer, which reached insane heights of popularity during its first season, isn't really praised for its art style. Most people will tell you that they hate the art style. So then why is it that these kinds of manga become so popular? Well, Araki claims that every popular manga consists of artwork that is instantly recognizable. In other words, a person can identify the drawing as soon as they see it. For example, if I show you this red and white ball with a dot in the middle, odds are you'll immediately think of Pokemon. This ability to draw an image that creates that kind of recognition is what Araki refers to as signification, claiming that the artwork of a popular manga can be summarized as effective signification. In other words, a manga's popularity is determined by how well it can deliver recognizable imagery. Now, Araki goes on to explain that a manga needs to balance signification with realism, but for the context of this video, just know that a manga needs to balance its recognizable imagery with enough realism to keep the story engaging. But the key takeaway is that the more recognizable a story is, the more likely it is to become popular. And while Araki brings this up in the context of artwork, this lesson is even more relevant in the context of the internet and popular culture. For example, I've never seen a single episode of The Mandalorian. I know, sue me. But if you show me a picture of Baby Yoda, I immediately think of The Mandalorian. Even though I haven't seen a single episode, I know what this is because the image is such a popular meme. The same is true for JoJo's. The story has such a long list of memes that even if you don't like anime, there's probably a handful of memes that you recognize as soon as you see them. Joseph's "oh my god," the Pillarman introduction, and also just anything about Sawarudo, have all been memed so many times that it's nearly impossible not to recognize them. And like we talked about earlier, a lot of this is due to the absurdity. JoJo's is literally so bizarre that it impacts you to the point where all you want to do is meme about it. And let's be honest, that's exactly what we do. But bringing things back to Chainsaw Man, the fact that it's just as absurd as JoJo's suggests that it will likely lead to a similar amount of memes. Each scene leaves you with an unforgettable experience, and like Araki's work in JoJo's, those experiences become instantly recognizable. The Kobeni dance is just one example. There's also this scene where Kobeni and Power get into a car accident, reflecting a hilarious combination of shock and horror I'm sure we've all gone through at one point. Then there's this one girl with half her brain hanging out that exclusively says Halloween, Denji's notorious nutshot contest, And of course, that time Denji went devil mode and took a ride on his pet demon shark. These moments are all unforgettable and have actually already led to a pretty solid library of memes. And this is before the anime has even started, at which point it will become way more accessible and create a lot more memes. So this is exactly why Chainsaw Man is so iconic. Like JoJo's, it delivers a consistent amount of absurd characters and imagery that are guaranteed to create unforgettable experiences. In turn, those experiences become instantly recognizable and massively shared through memes. Now, do I think Chainsaw Man will become nearly as popular as JoJo's? Probably not, considering JoJo's has stood the test of time and took years to reach this kind of popularity. But I do think it has the potential to follow a similar trend. Chainsaw Man is a ridiculous story built on an absurd premise and tons of wacky characters. With time and the inevitable millions of memes, I have no doubt that this absurdity will carry the story to insane levels of popularity. And that's it for this discussion. As you can see, I love Chainsaw Man and was hyped to finally get to share that love with you. If you enjoyed this discussion, then make sure to like the video. If you'd like more One Piece, Dr. Stone, and other manga discussions like this one, then make sure to subscribe and follow along with each week's video. Thank you for watching, and I hope to hear from you soon.